The second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic has wreaked havoc across India, and it has left thousands of children struggling to cope with the effects, the loss of a single parent or both parents, and a high risk of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Has wreaked havoc across India, and it has left thousands of children struggling to cope with the effects, the loss of a single parent or both parents, and a high risk of abuse. I apologize for that. We have all heard and seen reports of distressing pleas on social media and other channels for children left without caregivers or resources being put up for adoption, infants needing milk and food and more. But the issues today that exist go far beyond this. Many children are being put up for illegal adoption, and even children with both parents are being pushed into trafficking in exchange for support to help survive the pandemic. How can we help ensure the safety and protection of children impacted by the pandemic? Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining in. We're here today to answer some of these questions, reflect on them, and chat with a very special guest who we have here, who I will tell you about in a little bit. And then you will see that her work that she has been doing in this space is going to give us some very, very valuable information and answer some of these questions that we have. So I'd like to introduce Sonal Kapoor. She is the founder, director of Protsahan India Foundation, an organization that works on child protection and encourages young adolescent girls from difficult backgrounds who've survived violence and abuse to reach their full potential by giving them access to education, healthcare, and gender justice. She is an Ashoka Fellow, Vital Voices Fellow, and World Bank Fellow. She has pursued child protection law from National Law School of India University and Harvard University. For the last 12 years, Sonal has done a lot of work at the intersectionality of bringing child protection and healing of childhood trauma together with a lens of justice and creativity for the children at the last mile. Protsahan has supported 6 lakh children in distress through meals, education, psychological trauma counseling, and support just between 2020 and 21. That's 6 lakh children in distress just between 2020 and 21. She has received innumerable awards and recognitions, and her achievements are only overshadowed by the tremendous impact and goodwill she has created around her. It's an honor to have the privilege of chatting with Sonal. You will see that though she be humble and be quiet, she is fierce and she is the voice for the unspoken. So, welcome, Sonal. Thank you for joining us and sharing your valuable voice, your experience with us. Before we dive in to really answer the questions that are rife on everyone's mind, I want you to shed a little light on what does Protsahan do, what does the foundation do, what has been the journey, and what kind of impact have you guys been creating out there?
Thank you, Mahima, for and the Kindness Foundation for just making this conversation possible. I think in the last 11 years of our existence, we have always and only worked on the core areas of child protection. Jahan pe the focus area has always been education, healthcare, and gender justice. We've rescued about 928 plus girls and so on and so forth. I will not get into the numbers of things right now, but I think in the last one and a half-ish year, what we are seeing on the ground is nothing less than a child protection emergency. In the simplest of terms, if I dare say, this is nothing less than a child protection emergency. This is not something that I think only the civil society needs to be concerned about, or only the government needs to be concerned about, or only the State Commission for Protection of Child Rights need to be concerned about. This is clearly something which I think everybody who's either a parent, teacher, just a citizen needs to be concerned about, and hence this conversation. So I think just the generic context of our work, we work with the most vulnerable, marginalized children, with a lot of focus on adolescent girls. But during emergencies, I think the focus on boy and girl and all of that just kind of melts away, and it's just like a child in distress that needs your support. So that's what we've been doing. All our child protection centers in the slums have been converted into COVID relief centers, whether it's dry rations, whether it's education scholarship support, whether it's linkages with the government scheme support, and XYZ. But I think the battle is just far from over. There's an impending third wave, and so on and so forth, that we're also all of us are scared about. But I think for children at the last mile, जिसके पास खाने के लिए अब नहीं बचा है, everything else, including education, just ends up becoming a luxury.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine. Now, it sounds really remarkable, all of the stuff that you've been doing and achieving. Sonal, can you tell me a little bit about, in this past 1 year, ever since the COVID and the pandemic wave has hit us, what is the primary, is there any new issue that has surfaced that you have to add on to the existing battles that you fight on their behalf, or has every existing thing just become more heightened? Is there any new challenges you're facing?
I think as a child protection setup in the country, I wouldn't say much has been like, something that just says that, oh, this is a new challenge, because we've been looking at all of these issues for the last forever, since we've been, working in this space for over a decade. But like you rightly said, the number and the enormity of, child abuse cases has gone up. There is also this massive, I think, social media frenzy, which is about COVID orphans, a term that I personally don't agree with at all, because even before the pandemic, there were more than 4 lakh kids in the orphaned kids in different orphanages, shelter homes across the country. So I think clearly there is this a lot of messages got circulated on Twitter to begin with, WhatsApps, constant messages that said 2-year-old girl, 2.5-year-old baby boy, Brahmin children up for adoption. There were messages where the details, the details of the immediate relatives of the children who were orphaned were circulated. But I think, which is absolutely, one is that it's atrocious, and the second is that it's illegal. Yet at the same time, when we are looking at the stuff on the ground, there is no denying the fact that children are losing parents. Nobody can, say that that's not true. But is that the only part of the problem, or is that 80 or 100% part of the problem, that the children are facing in distress? That's not true. But the media narrative is wanting everybody to, so immediately I see schemes, right? Immediately I see funders and corporate donors and good Samaritans with good intentions. Again, nobody's questioning the intentions, because I think the narrative that media ends up building, right, or the narrative that just ends up getting built, and more often than not, it's the media, right, that builds a certain narrative. It just cues the other work that's been happening in the child protection space. So, for example, in the last 1.5 month, you would have very, very specifically seen, the COVID orphan newspapers and newspapers, even at Protsahan. So maybe in a year we would have 2, 3, 4 media guys reach out to us on different issues, different conversations. But in the last 1.5 months, every big newspaper or every big media house, radio channel, international, Indian, whatever, they have reached out to us asking for, hey, what is the COVID orphan quote? What is the COVID orphan story? And we again, good intentions, all of that, okay, that they want to cover a certain aspect of, where the children are, ending up in distress. But the problem starts when that narrative ends up being the half truth ends up being the entire narrative. Because yes, like I said, 10%, maybe 15%, that is the part of the entire umbrella of child rights violations, which is neglect and abandonment that children are facing. But the other 85-90% part of the problem is children are still hungry. Children are being forced into sexual labor, into child labor, into transactional sex. But somehow, all the schemes, all the funding, all the intentions, all the programs are only going at 10% part of the whole problem. And I am in no way saying that that's not important, but look at it from a holistic perspective. Even for NGOs, for example, if a funder or a corporate comes up to us, say, hey, we want to support children who've been left off orphaned by COVID, we always kind of push back and give them the real picture from the ground. They can choose to support or not. That's entirely the donor's perspective. But at the end of the day, we have to look at the vulnerability mapping, something that we are constantly saying. And vulnerability mapping is again something that it's not that you do it once and it stays for 5 years. Every 3 months, every 6 months, that exercise would need to be repeated, because the vulnerability of the children is constantly going on increasing. The reason why we say vulnerability mapping ko pehle karo, don't make the poverty porn around the issue of COVID orphans. Like, I think one of my very senior mentors in this child protection space, she was giving an interview a couple of days back, and I loved this point that she made, in Akshi Ganguly, and I will repeat it, just to stress on the point that when tsunami came, or when the Bhuj earthquake came, we never spoke about the tsunami orphans, or we never spoke about, this entire piece about COVID orphans, COVID widows, COVID this, COVID that. The issues have always been there. Orphans ka issue हमारे देश में कोई नया नहीं है, right? But when this skewed narrative ends up building, what happens is then the state governments, the governments at the center, they start putting schemes because there is so much pressure through media, through social media. People are saying stuff, right? They only start building schemes of, beneficial schemes or whatever, only for a certain category. What
Mm,
happens to a child who's been sexually exploited? Now,
mm,
when we're talking about vulnerability mapping, Mahima, why is this important to understand is also because I'll give you two examples of cases from the ground that we are working with, right? In a partnership with the police and partnership with the local CWCs, local community care mechanisms, and all of that. The
mm,
first thing is, the first case example is there is this brother and sister duo. They lost their father last year in the first COVID wave, and they lost their mother in April, right? The neighbors and all of that, ये बिल्कुल एक अनपढ़ दादी दादे की मैं बात बता रही हूँ in a slum in Delhi, very impoverished space, very impoverished family. And the immediate people around and the space around, they were like immediately इनको adoption के लिए इनको shelter home में डालो, इनको orphanage में डालो. And the दादी says जो बिल्कुल पढ़ी लिखी नहीं है, वो दादी बोलती है मेरा 2 कमरे का छोटा सा मकान है, ये मेरे पोते पोती की this is the property rights that her pota poti have, right? वो shelter home चला जाएगा तो वो उसका कभी नहीं हो पाएगा, पहली चीज. दूसरी चीज, more often than not, if not always, the brother and the sister will end up getting separated if they end up in institutional care, right? The very semblance, हमें अभी भी याद है जब हम इस पर्टिकुलर फैमिली के घर जब इन्वेस्टिगेशन और केस डॉक्यूमेंटेशन एंड ऑल ऑफ दैट करने गए, जो छोटी बच्ची है 11 साल की जो पोती है, वो उसने बस एक जैसे बच्चा डिमांड करता है, ख्वाहिश करता है, तो उसको मीठी चीनी की रोटी खानी थी. एंड दिस दादी who's already a domestic worker, और अभी पूरे कोविड में बिकॉज ऑफ द मैडनेस, बिकॉज ऑफ अपनी पहले बेटे को इसने खोया था और अब बहू को भी खो दिया इस साल कोविड में. उसने 2 या 3 घर झाड़ू पोछा करने के लिए और उठा लिए हैं so that she can feed her grandchildren better, right? So she was वो चीनी लगा के कुछ ना कुछ लगा के वो अपने पोती को जो उसने ख्वाहिश करी वो उसको दे रही थी. will those children ever get labeling करना बहुत आसान है. Oh, this is an orphan. Of course it tugs at our heart, of course it kind of makes us angry, it makes us completely sad and helpless. But ये displaced or misplaced sympathy जो है, this I think does a lot of harm. Because even when you are working, I'll come to that, the rights based perspective of things also. But I think, okay, so this is one example where the so-called media would have designated or defined this child or these two set of brother and sisters as COVID orphans and in need of adoption or shelter homes, etc., etc. Whereas these children don't need to go anywhere. The dadi is about 58, 60 years of age. She can take care of these children, right? The dada is also decently, capable of work. Rather than throwing them in a shelter home, jahan pe everything is going to be stranger, like a stranger for them. Versus, so there is another case that I talk about, and hence the need to understand vulnerability mapping rather than, the knee-jerk reaction of COVID orphans, and why that's an issue. The other example where the mother and father are very well alive. The mother has, अभी थोड़ी सी better है, ये कुछ 1.5 महीना हो गया इस बात को, but I'm just, explaining a case from the ground, that the mother who was stuck to bed because of COVID, very severely sick, और these are slums in Delhi that I'm talking about, or any impoverished space that you can, imagine. वहाँ पे टेस्टिंग, वैक्सीनेशन तो बहुत दूर की बात है, वैक्सीनेशन हेसिटेंसी और वो सब तो बहुत दूर की बात है. यहाँ पे नॉर्मल RT-PCR या सिंपल नॉर्मल टेस्टिंग भी नहीं हो रही है. So there is no proof to tell whether the mother has a paper or proof of COVID positive, etc., but the symptoms are all the same. So where this is coming from, right? And she's not able to get up from the bed. आप परिवार से पूछोगे तो वो कहेंगे कि फीवर है, निमोनिया है, थोड़ा खांसी जुकाम नजला है. लेकिन the father, who now does not have access to his wife for sex, has started raping his 5, 6, and 14-year-old daughters. Right? It's an incest case. But these set of bachas, these 3 sisters, these 3 daughters, they will not figure out in any COVID orphan or COVID XYZ children in distress scheme. Right? Then there is another case, for example, where children are losing one parent, right? The main primary bread earner, in most cases it's the father, but in quite a few cases we've seen it's also the mother जो domestic helper का काम करके अपने बच्चों को पढ़ा रही है, लिखा रही है and everything. So when one primary caregiver goes, या जिस परिवार में 15,000 एवरेज इनकम है या 10,000 क्यूमुलेटिव इनकम ऑफ द हाउस होल्ड है, उसमें जो 5 या 6 हज़ार कमाने वाला है वो अब कोविड को सकम्ब कर गया. So look at the vulnerability of the children in that particular household. There are so many cases, हम specially जहाँ पे देख रहे हैं, तो जहाँ पे the fathers are dying, the mothers are left with almost no money or very little money. But jahan, and still, but the children are being taken care of, etc. NGOs, CWCs, whatever system we are able to connect them with. The second is where the mothers have died, and the fathers who've just taken up drinking to a point which they had never done. Because I'm not siding with them or whatever, but there has been a case where the father was himself in such a state of shock and trauma that he forgot, as he told our frontline worker, forgot to feed his children for 3 days.
Okay.
Little kids, 7th standard, 4th standard, and one of our frontline workers who was uske ghar ke agli hi gali mein tha, so it was easy for her to identify and recognize this case. But how, and all those children, so what we really came in as an organization to do, we didn't say, hey, put the children in a shelter home, do this institutional care. Even the juvenile justice law of the country says that institutionalization has to be the last resort. Every orphan does not have to end up in a shelter home. Models of kinship care, models of community care, models of extended family care have to be first looked at. These families, this dada dadi, this masi, bua, or whoever will come in to take in, I'm not saying in 10 on 10 or 100 on 100 cases, that's the reality. But in more often than not cases, it is. And even then, the local CWCs makes kind of issues a certificate or issues a kind of a some sort of a certification that this is a fit family to adopt the child, or this is a fit family to foster the child, right? Immediate knee jerk reactions. और आप इन दोनों cases को देखो ना, जहाँ पे so called this children who've lost parents, and so called the media frenzy word of COVID orphans, जिसको दादी, immediate family, masi, bua, everybody's taking care of. And this case where parents are very well alive, but because of vulnerabilities, the father has now, there's an incest case, right? So protection, care, and protection of these three sisters becomes way more important, right? So I think we need to stop. I think I was reading something in the morning, something hilarious and also extremely stupid, where it's something, some rumor or whatever, that वैक्सीनेशन के बाद चुंबकीय शक्ति बढ़ जाती है शरीर की, और एंड समटाइम्स इट जस्ट मेक्स माय पहले पहले तो मुझे गुस्सा आता था, अब तो मुझे गुस्सा भी नहीं आता है. बट आई थिंक the when the collective scientific consciousness, or when the collective IQ of the human race is, this is where we are at. So जब आप एक fake news देखते हो, या जब आप immediate अपने phone पे देखते हो कि this child has lost parents, you don't even go to the fact checking part of it, because you feel that's tugging your heartstrings, because you feel, oh, let's just circulate and put it as an Instagram story. The same message has, and like maybe 5 or 6 messages of children who've lost both parents to COVID have ended up coming to us at least like 100 or 100x times, because the same message will come to us 50 times as an Instagram story, 20 times as a Twitter a retweet, or a DM on Twitter, another 50 times as a WhatsApp message on different people in the organization, unke phone pe aata hai. And I think a lot of duplication happens, and most of these messages are fake, right? So people don't, jahan pe I think maybe I'm becoming too cynical or too, but I think jahan collective consciousness, scientific consciousness itni limited hai, वहां पे आप एक्सपेक्ट करो कि फैक्ट चेक होगा अडॉप्शन मैसेज के लिए. आई थिंक आई हैव लिमिटेड होप, बट आई थिंक maybe the awareness from every sphere of the society is critical. और आपको कुछ अपने posters और अपना कुछ ऐसा नहीं है that you have to every organization needs to put their own bandwidth. Just share the Childline 1098 number. Just share what the local ncpcr.gov.in. ncpcr is the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. और आपकी individual states में, जैसे महाराष्ट्र में महाराष्ट्र Commission of Protection of Child Rights, Delhi Commission of Protection of Child Rights, KCPCR, Kerala, so on and so forth, West Bengal, so every state has a Commission for Protection of Child Rights, and which is largely governed by the national NCPCR. So look at what the legal information is. adoption आपको करना है. There have been cases from some very dear friends, I hate to say, who texted, hey Sonal, so you run Protsahan, that you run this organization, can we, yeah, that you run this organization XYZ, can you help us, adopt this child, we've been trying to adopt for the last 3 years. And I'm like, hey, and the caveat that comes along with, and sometimes it's just difficult to tell your friends in as many words, but I think I have almost come to a point where I don't make it polite and nice anymore, where
Mm.
I've just come to a point where I'm like, please go and look at the correct sources of information, right?
Mm.
And this, the caveat, that comes along. हम अखबारों में पढ़ रहे हैं, बहुत बच्चे अपने पेरेंट्स खो रहे हैं, हमें भी बच्चा चाहिए, तो क्या हम किसी बच्चे की जिंदगी में भला कर सकते? आई थिंक when the adoption is a very beautiful process, there is no denying that, but when it stems from a mindset of charity करना है, when it stems from a mindset of दया और pity और sympathy, empathy से नहीं अगर हो रहा है और sympathy से हो रहा है, वो बहुत problematic है उस बच्चे के लिए. अगर आप एम्पथी से काम करोगे तो आप सबसे पहले देखोगे क्या उसकी इमीडिएट मासी, उसकी इमीडिएट बुआ, उसकी चाची, जहां उसके कजिन्स का सेम्बलेंस है, जहां उसकी अपनी इमीडिएट, और फिर उस परिवार को आप स्पॉन्सरशिप करिए, उस परिवार को सपोर्ट करिए, उस परिवार को गवर्नमेंट लिंकेजेस के साथ जोड़िए, राइट? कितने कितने परिवार हैं जहां अडॉप्शन की बात आती है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल महिमा, विल ऑल्सो टेक क्वेश्चंस, if people have,
Sure.
in
Yeah.
fact, if people have questions already, they can just put it in the question answer or the chat box or wherever, so we can start addressing it also. But I
So,
think
Sonal, what I'm hearing from you is that we, people are tending to jump the gun. We are having knee-jerk reaction, and primarily because of social media. All of this hype around, like you rightfully called this abhorrent term of COVID, often is coming around because of social media and the media, and you get the same messages just forwarded everywhere. And what I'm hearing from you is the two immediate things that one can do when they feel their heartstrings getting tugged, because that does happen, right? Whether we know the child or not, it does impact us, because nobody likes to see a child suffer. So the two things that I'm hearing from you are tangible things to do is, first and foremost, if you have direct access to the child, then see what is the other support system possible and see if you can get that
call
moving.
1098, the child
That's the first
helpline
part.
number of the country. Yes, that's the first
That's the
call to
first
action.
step. Okay. First step, call
1098.
1098. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a child helpline, and they have divisions for each state. So therefore, that's ncpcr.o.
So childline 1098, that's a fair question. 10 childline 1098, thus no art, ulti ginti. This is a national child helpline in the country. So every time anybody sees a child in distress, whether it's a child abandoned at a metro station, whether it's a child completely abandoned at a railway station, you see, 5-6 बच्चों को कोई suspiciously, आप सिर्फ suspicion के basis पे भी अगर आपको लगता है कि इस बच्चे को किसी भी चीज का खतरा है, XY, आपको बाल अधिकार का पूरा हिस्ट्री जानने की जरूरत नहीं है. अगर आपका गट फील कह रहा है that this child is not safe, this child needs care and protection, just remember 1098 and call them, report. वो 1 या 1.5 या 2 घंटे में you can report anonymously, you can give your number, they will touch base with you, but they will come and solve it, right? The other part of the child protection system is the NCPCR and the state, SCPCRs, right, which is the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights, or the State Commission for Protection of Child Rights. इनकी भी helpline numbers हैं. इनको आप simple, इनको just you look them up on your on their websites, whatever the nodal number, more often than not, if not always, because they are also genuinely stretched, more often than not they will respond to your call. But if they don't, then there's always a 1098. That's the first call to action.
But Sonal, I'm just going to call it out over here that in general, the trust for government agencies and bodies is kind of running a little low. And maybe it has been always running low. And people often ask me, these numbers exist, but what's the point of it? Do they actually do anything? Is there any care that's actually given? So could you tell us a little bit about what, if we do pick up the phone and call 1098, what happens next?
So the first thing we need to understand is that जो child helpline number है, मैं आपको किसी और के experience की तरफ से नहीं, and I also do a lot of bashing and criticism wherever it's required of whoever
Sonal,
in
I'm
whichever.
sorry to interrupt you, but we actually have some people in the audience who are logging in from different parts of the world. And if we
Mhm.
can stick to English, they'll probably understand our
Okay.
conversation. Just that
Sure,
was just
sure,
a
sure,
request
sure,
to
sure.
the audience.
I think
Yeah.
it just kind of
I
automatically
know what you
happens.
mean.
So
Yes.
I think yeah. So wherever in whichever power, authority, whatever chair the people are sitting, I've never refrained from questioning them, right?
Mhm.
But yet at the same time, I can only speak about the experiences at Protsahan and the entire child rights sector,
Mhm.
and I will not even say like 7 on 10 times, but probably 9 on 10 times the child line, response. The child line gets back. Of course, there is
Mm,
a little follow up required. You can't say that I called you up raat ko I called you up at around 1 a.m. in the night, and there was no response, and you
mm,
never called them back again. So maybe a couple of calls would be required. Maybe a couple of questions would be required from the Good Samaritan who's reporting the case.
mm,
But 1098 is the nodal agency, right, where where a response will be given. If at
mm,
all, if it's not, then just 100, 100, the police 100 control room number, just
mm,
register your report, there. Get to a local CWC, which is again, if just a simple Google touch away, just a
mm,
simple Google search away, you will find this child welfare committee, the local CWC in
mm,
in your whatever XYZ city or state or town that you are in, right?
mm,
So I mean, to expect sometimes that even somebody's, even when you go to our mom to, our own moms, right, that, we want to eat this today. How many times
mm,
it's always answered? Like, it's like probably 9 on 10, 8 on 10 times. So I think nothing is perfect. I mean,
mm,
of course, for sure. But the
mm,
best systems for children that exist in the country start from 1098.
mm,
Organizations like Protsahan are, quite few, far in between, maybe a plenty in different states, but a
mm,
Protsahan can only be a Protsahan, right? In a few
mm.
different slums, in a few different cities, maybe doing a lot of trauma counseling calls online.
True.
But we
Mm,
can't be a child line,
mm,
right? A child line is a government, and irrespective of all the politics that goes on beyond, behind closed doors or in the open doors, child
mm,
line has majoritarily nothing to do with any of that. It works
mm,
for children day and night, right? And
mm,
I have seen those guys work very closely, right? So I
mm,
think this is one helpline number that people should commit to memory, for the lack of
mm,
a better word or better thought. Because if
mm,
you feel helpless, call 1098 and report.
mm,
Follow it up with them. You
mm,
don't have to put them emails, you don't have to go after their lives. Just one call, or maybe one or two follow-ups on that call, is all
mm,
that it'll take to rescue children in need of care and protection.
mm. That's it's actually very reassuring and heartening to hear you say that, because most people don't have this mistrust and they don't know if that's going to have any
And I
value at
think
all, or anybody will.
the
Mm,
mistrust also has reasons, right? There are reasons why some of the mistrust things have
mm,
come up. And
yeah.
again,
Mm,
I kind of don't disagree with that entirely. But as far
mm,
as Childline 1098 is concerned, I
mm,
know these guys work. I've seen them very closely.
mm.
They will respond to a child in distress like nobody else's business.
Okay, that's very good to know. That's really good to know, Sonal. However, for people who are not sitting in India, and it's just a WhatsApp message or a forward or something, and it's not just about individual children, but they feel that kind of triggers and spurs them into thinking about how can we help. What is it that we can do to help the children who are being impacted. Now, I completely understand what you talk about. It's only now that the spotlight is coming on the children's difficulties because of the COVID scenario, although 90% of the issues have been existing for a while. But for people who are sitting outside India and overseas and they want to help in some way, clearly, I don't know if they can pick up the phone and call 1099, 1098, but what is the help that you think they can do? Because I'm always flooded with this question. I'm overseas, what can I do to help?
So we've got a lot of those calls and Facebook messages and Instagram messages and emails, and constantly, especially in the last maybe 1 year, and more so in the last 1 2 months. I'll give you a very direct example without trying to sound too mushy or politically correct. We got a message, in fact, quite a few a slur of a few messages, one after the other on Facebook, good, very good intention, and you could see it, you could read it. Again about we've read so much because also the international media has covered a lot of this. Again, the skewed, misplaced narrative of only COVID orphans, only COVID
Mm.
orphans in India, and the
Correct.
other, sexual exploitation, child labor, child marriages, all of that has receded. In contrast, I think, as a narrative that's being built. So
Mm.
people are not. I think people also do not, again, without the fear of sounding politically incorrect, correct. The truth is that when we get messages saying that, hey, we are a little worried of giving money to NGOs, or we are a little worried of
Mm.
giving money to, to a charity, but they're asking us, right, at the same time, that how can we help take calls, can we help do some volunteer work. And I'm
Mm.
like, that's not that you will not do it well, guys. You're
Mm.
sitting in an absolutely different geographical location. Even somebody sitting in Delhi, if they want to volunteer, leave alone a US or a Europe or wherever, this work where either a child has lost their primary caregivers,
Mm.
this is not just about giving you a dry ration ka bora. This is not
Mm.
about just giving you a sack of, just food grains. this
Mm.
this this need, this care, this protection extends for years. Are
Mm.
you ready and committed to volunteer for like 3 to 5 years at least? You have jobs and we understand, but
Mm.
let's be practical, let's be sensible. Just
Mm.
because something is tugging our hearts, that's not how the organizations or NGOs run. A
Mm.
lot of people feel NGOs are just voluntary work.
Mm.
कि अगर हमारे पास, if we have nothing else to do, we start an NGO. A lot of people feel, oh, because we have a lot of money, and we start organizations. The
Mm.
truth is that there's a lot of child rights and law and
Mm.
psychosocial understanding, psychological trauma care, counseling understanding, the child protection system. For us sitting in Delhi, for example, getting connected to a DCPCR or the Delhi Commission for Protection of Child Rights, constant calling, making sure even whatever connections we have in the space, using and like literally exploiting those connections to make sure a child is taken care of. And I think a lot, we need people on the ground who are hired, for whom it's an
Mm.
whom I can also hold accountable, right?
Mm.
That, hey, this was done and this was not done, who also treat it as a part of maybe a job, but 20,000 times more than a job,
Mm.
right? Because again, I'm not saying don't it should not be misconstrued in a way where I'm saying, hey, volunteers don't do anything. Absolutely not. That will be like stupid to say, right?
Mm.
But yet at the same time, let's look at what are we, if you're talking about an abandoned child, if you're talking about a child who's gone through sexual exploitation, and if
Mm.
you do not understand the POXO law in the country, which is protection of children against sexual offenses of
Mm.
20, I mean, where are we trying to like, it sounds very great. Oh yeah, volunteer. If you can give money to support a charity doing this groundwork, give donations. And I will not mince my words when I'm saying that.
Mm.
Don't just give to Protsahan. Do your
Mm.
due diligence. Give it to an organization that you trust. Give
Mm.
it. We are based in Delhi, right? But if there's an organization that's based in some part of Bangalore, Karnataka, some part of anywhere where you are, do your due diligence. Ask five people. Look up their website. Look up, not just their website. In fact, go beyond. Look
Mm.
what Google says, what five media newspapers or whatever XYZ. Do a
Mm.
half an hour due diligence, and you would know whether, write to somebody in the organization. If not right away, if they're genuinely on the ground, maybe they'll
Mm.
take a couple of days to come back to you, but they will
Mm.
respond, right?
Mm.
But I think knee jerk reactions to anything up. Would you do a knee jerk reaction sort of a solution for your own child? You
Mm.
won't. Would you
Mm.
say that, hey, I will get five volunteer teachers to teach my son English or Hindi? You
Mm.
need proper people who you can hold accountable. And this is
Mm.
a child we are talking about who needs care and protection in a, on a long term basis.
Mm.
All those projects, all I am looking at, things. um, I think Rato Rat, just within days, funds have started saying that,
Mm.
1,000 million COVID orphans are being supported.
Mm.
I'm like,
Mm.
who, even the
Mm.
NCPCR and the Ministry of Women and Child is still, of course, the ministry says 577 as COVID orphans. That's also not the real, it doesn't seem like the real data. But the
Mm.
NCPCR has come up. They have, Supreme Court has ordered the states to come up, upload the numbers of, upload the cases of children who are losing parents, one or both, right? Because
Mm.
the vulnerability is not about if a child, like we said, it's not about a child who's lost both parents. Only then the child is vulnerable. A child facing any damn child right violation of the country in the country is absolutely as much in need of care and protection as anything else. So when somebody, if somebody's heart sort of kind of really, gets mushed up and whatever, donate to a charity, that is accountable. Keep following it up with them. But I think at the same time, we need to be very, I would, try to bring in this perspective that I was reading something in the morning and I saw that Mercedes Benz, they came up with some new Maybach editions of some 50 cars that they launched in India. Okay. And their target was that until 2021 or by end of 2021, these 50 cars, special edition or whatever Maybachs, have to be sold. Within the launch, at the height when the oxygen crisis was devastating the country, and especially, the not just the town, the cities or the towns, but also the rural, started getting into the rural part of the country. Mercedes launches this special edition Maybach, which is for about $400,000, or I think more than 3 crores a piece. And their target was to kind of sell all of them by the end of 2021. It got lapped up in 30 days, right?
Wow.
And if so, it's not that India doesn't have money, or people who are wanting to volunteer, they only want to volunteer their time. If we are on the ground, we need to have 3 people monitor, track the case, get in touch with the government, get in touch with the CWC, do this, do 5,000 other things. I mean, it's, sometimes I feel that sometimes there are also people who give 500 rupees and say that, what happened with our 500 rupees? Give us one, a rupee by rupee breakup. I mean, like, we're not going to give you a rupee by rupee breakup. At the end of the year, there'll be an audited financial report. Please, by all means, go to the website, get it checked, or, just write to us if it's not uploaded as yet. We will send you the audited financial statements, but with your name written on it. But I think sometimes people also have unjustified expectations from the civil society, which I think doesn't do anybody any good. Because if you are an engineer working at NASA, if you are a designer working at Lintas, I think that's what you do the best. Don't expect him to come and do our job as a volunteer because you felt something very mushy for half an hour on a certain day. Because that does nobody any good, especially not the child for whom it's meant for. The intentions might be sweet and beautiful, but it doesn't do anybody any good.
Okay, so call 1098 and then donate to the organizations, do your own due diligence and
I can tell
understand
you
who
some
you're.
organizations right away. Okay.
Okay, that would
So,
really be helpful. Yeah.
yes. So, like I constantly, even when we are putting up appeals for donation for Protsahan India Foundation on Instagram or a Twitter, we always say go to a Huck Center for Child Rights, go to Leher, go to Council to Secure Justice, go to Prerna, Prerna Anti-Trafficking Cell based in Bombay, go to CSA, Catalyst for Social Action. There are 20,000 charities doing good work with children. How open, how just, how relevant you want to make your due diligence, it's up to you, right? As a donor.
Absolutely. Is all of this information, like, is there some place where we can get this? Because I know you gave us a whole bunch of names, but I don't think anyone has caught it that quick. So is there a
Okay, I
place,
can
a
put them
reliable
down.
source, if you could, or but is there a reliable source somewhere where if someone just wanted to go and go down the list and give to someone, because we know it's already been vetted?
I
Because even
don't
though I know
know.
that we recommend due diligence, I don't know how many people will have the time and bandwidth to do diligence. They would much rather just go donate the money, and if someone tells them that this is reliable, and is there a place of that kind of
I
information?
don't know if it exists. I don't know. Maybe go to the Darpan portal, but
Okay.
of the Niti Aayog. But again, I don't know if people will have the understanding to see which organization is a child rights organization.
Okay.
But I think any organization that works with children and
Uh-huh.
you genuinely know, don't go up. Ask. I think this needs to be told in as many words. Don't go up to say that we will only support COVID orphans as that I'm giving you 10,000 rupees or 1 lakh rupees. Only do work with COVID orphans. Work with any damn child in distress who needs this, whether it's education scholarship, whether it's just food on the plate, whether it's I mean, just write into us. Yeah, we will put you in touch with whoever we want.
Okay.
If yeah,
That's helpful to know.
I think.
So,
But
but regardless.
if you also go to protsahan.co.in and look at the media section, you will see a lot of good organizations that have been covered.
Okay, that's helpful to know. That's helpful to know. Some of the questions that are coming in, I'm going to dive right
Mhm.
into it because I think there's some very relevant ones. So, somebody wants to know, how can we help a child whose parents or family don't want to involve external help and intervention? And to what extent could Childline intervene in such cases? Because, like you pointed out, one of the examples, the father was abusing the children and he clearly will not seek external help. So when the father himself will not seek external help, but is the source of the abuse or the the maltreatment of the child, can Childline do anything? Do they intervene?
Yes, so that's exactly what they do, keeping in mind all the survivor centric approaches. Sometimes, if the child is with the abuser,
Mm,
so obviously they will thwart any intervention like a child line or a
correct.
police or a local SCPCR or an NCPCR or whatever XYZ, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean, we kind of sit back and say, yeah, not a part of our problem because the father doesn't agree. The father is the perpetrator here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So definitely call 1098. They are better equipped than you and I to handle situations like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's an NGO, whether it's a child rights organization or it's an organization that's been working with children, either in the education, healthcare, XYZ space, they
Mm-hmm.
would know. If
Mm-hmm.
they don't, then they will, they would have some sort of a connection, either the teacher of the child, some sort of a network that they will explore. And that's like something like we do on an everyday basis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, we do understand the family, like one of the things of the in the Protection of Children Against Sexual Offences Act, the POXO Act of the country, that basically outlines how the guidelines of how any case of sexual abuse against a child needs to be kind of taken care of, monitored, reported, and due diligence and justice kind of be meted out to that case. It kind of outlines all of that. One of the things it says is mandatory reporting, right? Of course, there is another aspect to the whole piece as well, where sometimes, in cases of severe incest, like particular, a lot of cases also, like we dealing with, the mother does not want to report. Then our social workers, our child protection workers constantly keep monitoring that family and that child. We give the child, so it's very case to case. But in case you feel you are not an NGO, if you are not a social protection worker, report it to 1098, because the law demands mandatory reporting.
Mm-hmm.
There is
We keep
no,
coming.
and if it says, if you know about it and if you don't report it, you are equally liable to be criminalized under the law.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we keep coming back to 1098, which seems to be like a
Mm.
really helpful resource for all kinds of, help when it comes to children. And I think that's very good to hear that. So one of the other questions that are coming up are, once the child gets adopted or is, with the child protection home, can a sponsor be a part of the child's, ongoing progress and
Yes.
rearing? And can they get to interact with the child or have a say in the education? So, of course, the child got absorbed into the system, but can there be an identified sponsor who looks after them long term?
See, sponsorship is absolutely, absolutely. In fact, the juvenile justice law of the country, it gives clear guidelines. I'm not a lawyer, but I think if you read up or engage with a lawyer, they will tell you. The law gives specific guidelines on sponsorship. Also, there are organizations, quite a few organizations like Prayas, SPYM, quite a few, I think, who run their own shelter homes, Prerna, ATC, right? So on and so forth. And they run their own homes where children stay, right? So children who've been rescued from ABC points, they stay there until they get either adopted or sponsored or XYZ, or they go back, mainstreamed in some way or the other. And I'm not sure if even asking this question about if somebody has a say in the education bit, it's a XYZ of the child, is the right question to ask. I'm not sure about that. An organization like Protsahan will probably not allow that kind of intervention, because we have a limited team. If we keep on answering and going back to each donor about, hey, this is, we will release one report, you look at it, and and a lot of times people understand why that's coming in, but a lot of people don't understand that, and we are absolutely okay with. But there will be other NGOs who will probably say, hey, who probably have bigger manpower and more budgets, etc., who will say, yes, we can give you individualized report card of this child. But again, how much of say do you have in the education and all of that of the child? I am not sure.
Okay, fair enough. So, let's talk
Because
about.
also, Mahima, one of the things is, for example,
Mhm.
a lot of people, expect direct access to the child,
Mm,
right? In the sense of, but a phone number of the child, the photo of
mm,
the child, how the child is growing up.
mm,
Sometimes will take, even at the best of intentions, end up taking the picture. If they'll come to the organization or the shelter home, end up taking a picture.
mm,
If, for example, most shelter homes will not allow that to happen. But
mm.
for example, if they will probably go back and put it up on the Facebook,
Yeah.
circulate it to 5 people, even as the good intention. I'm not saying, oh, the
Mm,
intention is always malified,
mm.
but that child is, it's a minor we are
Yeah.
talking about,
Mm,
who's in need of care and protection, or could be a juvenile, or could be XYZ,
mm,
right? And if you are sharing the picture without the, leave alone the consent and all of that, because under 18, the consent of under 18 person is not, or a child is not consent, right?
mm,
So it's illegal again, right?
mm,
So there are reasons why, or for example, when adoption processes have to
mm,
happen. So a lot of people who reached out to us saying,
mm,
um, we want to adopt, and we said, hey, go back to CARA, which is
mm,
CARA, right? The
mhm,
Central Adoption Resource Authority .nic.in, right?
mm.
If you want, somebody can put it up in the chat
Yeah.
box,
Yeah.
cara.nic.in.
Mhm,
And on this particular website, there is a carings portal, CARINGS.
mm,
There is a reason why due diligence is required, because the child should not fall. You might be good intentioned coming to adopt a child, yet at the same time, if trafficking, if a couple, who's into trafficking, they will also come as nicely dressed
mm,
and spoken as you
mm,
are.
mm,
How will CARA or a government agency or an authority make sure that you
mm,
are genuine and they are not? And
mm,
hence, there is a due diligence process. Hence, there are checks.
mm,
Hence, there is a proper individual care plan that the child is, is made for every child who is in a shelter home.
mm,
So that stuff does take time, right?
mm,
But go through the right legal channels, go through the right processes. If anybody tells you, we will get you a child in 3 months, because there's anyway
mm,
so many COVID
mm,
orphan cases happening, we will get you a child in 3 months, and I have connections.
mm,
Stay, like, beware. One, that's illegal.
mm,
Two, even if that person, worst case or best case scenario, even if that person has good intentions,
mm,
tomorrow the child's parents or immediate family or XYZ, if it's a fake case, they
mm,
might come up and claim the child that you've already adopted and fallen in love with,
mm,
right? So go through the right legal channels, and at the first instance, do not believe in knee jerk, solutions or whatever.
mm,
Support the extended kins or relatives of the child.
mm,
Ask 1098 to monitor.
mm,
Support a charity. Understand the laws. Understand child rights as a domain, if at all you want to get into the depths of it. But
mm,
support 1098. Support a local charity like Protsahan, that that you've been working with for a time. You know that you can trust. And
mm,
Protsahan jaise, there are tens and tens of
mm,
charities in the country. You
mm.
just have to do your due diligence.
So how does one, assuming we've done let's take Protsahan for instance. Do you guys take donations from abroad? I mean, how does
No,
one?
so currently we don't have FCRA. The entire registration, everything is in process.
Mm,
Currently, we can only accept money in INR, which is domestic, funds in the country.
mhm,
So, and if anybody wants to donate, they just have to go to protsahan.co.in, which
mhm,
is Protsahan, protsahan.co.in.
we'll put it in
And
the
there is
chat
a
box.
donate tab.
Mhm.
Yeah,
We'll
perfect.
put
I
that in
think,
the chat box that the website,
sure.
and yeah, go ahead, please. There's a donate tab.
And there's a donate tab there. Just like, once you make a donation in INR from an Indian account, from a domestic source, and immediately you'll be given an acknowledgement of the donation being made. In the next 2 or 3 working days, you'll be given an ATG tax exemption certificate as well with the receipt.
So,
Just
but
for the transparency, accountability, all of that.
sure, but is Protsahan associated with Give India or any other
Yes,
crowdfunding
yes. In
platform which
fact,
does accept? Yeah.
yes. So
Uh,
no. So yes and no to that question. So we are associated with Give India. In fact, this week we are in conversations with them to launch something this week. But
mhm,
again, we will only be the law of the country does not allow us until we have, or any charity for that matter, to accept foreign money if they don't have FCRA, and our
mhm,
FCRA license is in process as we speak.
mhm,
So we can only accept INR money right now. I
mhm,
think for other organizations who accept FCRA, I think HUC accepts FCRA. Do your due diligence and check once again. But this is HUC Center for Child Rights, HAQ, Center for Child Rights, one of those fabulous people in the sector that I constantly learn from. I think Leher also has an FCRA, but again, do your due diligence and check, which organization has the compliances for foreign money, domestic money. I think just going on the website, their basic website will give you all the details.
So just to clarify, because I've had at least two, three people ask me the same question,
Mhm.
Protsahan does not accept foreign donations right now. It will in the future because the paperwork is in process.
Yes, yes,
Even if the crowdfunding platform like Give India otherwise accepts, foreign donations, the individual NGO needs to be certified FCRA.
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
therefore, currently there is no way for Protsahan specifically to get the foreign funding in, but they will in the future. So you can keep in touch with the progress, and whenever you do have the FCRA, Sonal, you please let us also know. We will broadcast it to
In
our
fact,
people.
I would request everyone. There's been such, fascinating support that's come in from, I think, not always money, right? But sometimes some email that just kind of, after a crazy, tough, mentally exhausting day, there are emails that I read, and it just makes me feel like some scientist from NASA wrote to us, and I was like, how did he come to know about our work? And the issue was the same, that he wanted to contribute, and then there was this FCRA domestic this, and we said, hey, no, we have to comply by what the law of the land says. And he says, okay, so when you get your FCRA, let me know. For all these 6 months, 8 months of the process time that will take, I will save up the donation that's meant for Protsahan, and I will send it all along once you have your clearance. And we told them, if not us, give it to these two, three, four other charities. And he said, no, I want to give it to only you guys. But sometimes it's also one of the largest, I think, issues that we are facing in the country is child hunger. Um, there are issues where lactating mothers, nursing mothers who've lost their husbands in COVID, first, second, wave, irrespective. 3 months pregnant, or 2 months pregnant. Then there are women who are lactating with 2, 3, 4 months infants, and we have seen that because they've not eaten since their husband died, right, or eaten much because there was not enough money to bring food home. Their bodies have stopped producing as much milk. And we are kind of supporting them with baby food, with milk, with all of those bits. So I think, if sometimes you think that nothing will work, probably I think, just send packets and packets of food to any other organization or any organization. They will absolutely make use of that.
So, Sonal, one thing that's on everybody's mind, and we're kind of not talking about it as much yet, but we're also very wary. The second wave took us by surprise. I mean, it just came in,
Mm.
and it was like a tsunami that hit us. It was far worse than the first wave. And in many sectors, on many fronts, we were not prepared and we got taken by surprise. And of course, now there is this conversation of an impending third wave. There may be
Mm.
one, there may not be one. There is research that backs it and refutes it. So if there is going to be a third wave, and is there any kind of precautions or anything we need to keep in mind, and not just for our own children, but in terms of we all have a mortality, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of that, but also in terms of any kids that we see in our in our environment, and what kind of precautions are you guys taking, any for planning of any kind, if there is any?
Yes, yes. So again, like a disclaimer, I'm not a medical, practitioner. I'm not a doctor. I can only talk about from the field practitioner experience. So we are in touch with a lot of good pediatrics, national, international, etc., taking their advice on how this entire the next 6 months, we should be looking at. But clearly, one thing is for sure, that a lot of science and evidence and data that's coming in, it is showing that the third wave, if it comes, Britain is already starting to see the third wave, the impact of third wave, and it is insane as what we hear and see on Twitter, and read some reports from the credible international media. So that is pretty scaring. There have been reports and evidence backed, I think, scientific journals rather, that have come up from Netherlands, where the scientific community there is saying that it's not just going to be a COVID 2020 or a COVID 21. They prepare and brace yourselves up for a COVID 36, 2036, and a COVID 2040, right? So when the scientist community is saying that it's not me. I think then it's a reason for alarm bells to ring.
Mm-hmm.
Yet at the same time, a very massive question that also plagues us is, as a country, a lot, I don't know, like 65, 70, 75% of our children, going to schools is something that would ensure, that has always ensured that they got one midday meal, right? So their schools have been the portals for getting food and nutrition and care, because when their parents would do the dihadi work, or when their parents would do the day, migrant, daily wage work, is when they would kind of send their children to to school for the 5, 6, 4 hours, and also kind of go work, right? So now
Mm-hmm.
that care and protection system has crumbled,
Yeah.
right? Their food and nutrition has crumbled, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hunger is becoming a mass. So we are also looking at this last 1.5 year where children would have eaten. There has been specific reports. I think I read a few days back. I'm forgetting who cited it, but I think it was Bloomberg, if I'm not wrong, that marginalized families are beginning to eat lesser. In the last 1 year, they've started eating way less than what they would have eaten on a normal day. When we go out, last year was completely when we were on the field, feeding people, partnering with guys like Zomatos and Swiggies of the world, and constantly just trying to feed people either with dry rations or cooked meals, or nutrition packets, protein thing, biscuits, whatever we had, because children didn't have anything to eat, right? So that 1.5 years of eating less British, less nutritious stuff, will somewhere be working on their immunity as well, will somewhere be, the fact, leave alone marginalized children, that's a massive chunk that worries me. There's this other chunk of children who are just sitting at home, they're not even going to play anymore. They're constantly either on the screen, with their screen times increasing, they're constantly just low about the fact that they have not met their favorite teacher or their favorite friends for for a year or more. Everything is online. The risks, we are not even getting, that's another conversation for another day, but the risks of online, how children are exposed to online risks. Most of the marginalized children we work with, they don't even have digital devices, or even if they get access to digital devices, right? Screen time and all of that is not a problem for them. Hunger is a problem, right? But even if, for example, we are making sure a lot of girls from marginalized spaces, because access to digital devices is also a massively gendered issue, right? So we are also making sure that adolescent girls who are in 9th standard, 10th standard, are getting access to phones, etc. But we also have to be very mindful as NGOs, or if for example, now when people are saying volunteering, try, you do volunteering seminars with NGOs where you're telling the children there, who are the first generation. This is something you can do as a volunteering activity. You're telling the first generation learners about, social media etiquettes, safety online. How do you make sure that, if somebody harasses you, or cyber bullies you, 1, 2, 3, this is what you can do. In fact, if you go on to Protsahan's website again, in the resources section, you will see, even if you are not a child rights crusader and a child rights practitioner, you're just a well-intentioned, well-meaning volunteer who wants to spare 2 hours a week, get in touch with any damn NGO, credible organization in the country. Use any of the resources from our website. You will be, equipped to do trainings. It's in such easy language, such cartoons and animated language, that you will be able to tell a child, 1098 or cyberbullying, or this is how you kind of, so things like that, right? But on the ground, the issues that we are seeing are so massive and so manifold, but something needs to be started somewhere.
So it sounds like, as far as kids are concerned, of course, there's malnutrition, the nutrition is impacted. Then there comes you have kids who have too much gadget time, then there are kids who don't even have a gadget. So there is loss of learning, there is loss of education. To me, I get a lot of questions about, what is there, is there a loss of learning? And B, if there is, then what is the gap? How is that gap going to be filled? What can we do about it? Whether it's for the marginalized communities or for the ones who are privileged enough to have the gadgets with them. Education seems to be another question which people are grappling with. And those of us who are able to provide gadgets and provide the environment for learning for our children, it's not as big of an issue the issue over there is too much of the gadget exposure. But what about the marginalized communities? Like you rightfully pointed out, they don't have access to gadgets. They don't have access to online learning. So what was supposed to have been, what we thought might have just lasted for a couple of months, stretched into a year. Now it's stretching again into the future. And like you said, we don't know how long. So
Yeah.
what's going to happen to this mass of kids who are just not entering the education space, they don't have access to it anymore? That's something that worries many of us, and I don't know if there is an answer to that out there.
There's a lot of conversation, at least in Delhi. I can speak about that. I see a lot of good conversations happening with the education department, etc., where conversations about how do the 12th standard students, for
Mm,
example, who've missed their exams, right?
mm,
How will the evaluation be done? Not just in Delhi, I think across the country. But I think
mm,
this our Minister of Education of the state, Manish Sisodia, he has
mm,
come up with or his team rather has come up with this entire plan of action, that this is how evaluation for CBSE students and CBSE exams could, in the fact that exams didn't happen, how do they now maneuver the the next
mm.
stage of the college graduation, whatever, of their
Correct.
life. The
Mm,
other massive part of what also worries me is, if schools are reopened
mhm,
and the third wave hits our children, it's
mm,
going to be a disaster.
mm,
If schools don't open, the children are anyway not getting their midday meals. The children are losing out on learning outcomes. It is anyway going to be a disaster, because these children, unskilled, uneducated, will be entering into a further added pool of underemployed or unemployed youth
mm,
tomorrow, right? So, यहाँ कुआं है, यहाँ खाई है,
mm,
right? There is a disaster here and there's a disaster here. But I
mm,
think what needs to be done is now, if somebody wishes to volunteer, don't
mm,
volunteer with something that you're not committed for.
mm,
If you can stay committed for even like 5% of the stuff, then only volunteer for that 5% of the stuff. If you think that volunteering is not your cup of tea right now, but you can
mm,
probably so for example, a amazing set of artists, storytellers, photographers. There is Chennai Photo Binele that's come up. I think they've got together 100, maybe 200 best photographers
mm,
from the world, who are just putting their photographs up for auction to raise funds for Protsahan and Khalsa Aid, right? There is
mm,
this beautiful team of storytellers from Mumbai. In fact,
mm,
three women led by Sonal Kapoor, who just
mm,
does stories and then raises funds for Protsahan.
mm,
There is Aarti Verma from Mumbai again, who
mm,
does beautiful, I think, illustrations and all of that. And she's just selling her
mm,
illustrations to raise funds for us. So I think one does not have, and that's also volunteering and fundraising at the same time.
mm,
I think it's just the intention and putting that intention into action. नहीं तो
mm,
you can keep thinking about what, how, and it'll always seem daunting, because
mm,
the magnitude of the problem is so huge in every
mm,
aspect of however you want to think or look at it, that it'll
mm,
always be like, oh, I can't look at a million children. Start with
mm,
5. Start
mm,
with just your domestic helpers children. How many
mm,
of us can stand up and say, hey, because with all this lockdown and all of that, that little 3, 4, 5,000 rupees or 2,000 rupees or whatever that people used to give their domestic helps,
mm,
now that they're not doing your work and you are washing your own dishes, and you're like, oh, now I can't give you this 3,000 rupees
mm,
because you don't deserve it, right? I
mm,
mean, I think rather than getting jittery and getting whatever at COVID orphans as an issue, start taking care of those 1 and 2 and 3 people, who are directly there in your life, because they also have children, or they also have, it's just crazy every which way we think about it. But I think misplaced sympathy will not work for anyone.
mm. You can't save the whole world, but you can save the one in front of you. You can start there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You can do that. It's very it's lovely to hear about all of these people who are doing different things to raise funds for a cause, and it's literally the variety of ways in which you can volunteer. You can't physically do something, go out there and be on the field. Maybe you don't have the funds to give it right out of your pocket, but hey, maybe you have a skill, and that skill can help you raise funds for donations. So that's also very nice way of volunteering. And at this point, I just want to say that there are a lot of young members of our society who are very motivated. They look at all of the suffering
Mm.
happening around there, and they also get very motivated to do something. And we cannot put the young crowd out on the field, and they don't have the money to give. So this is literally what they're doing. In fact, the Kindness Foundation has a team of very young interns, like 13, 14-year-olds, who have been doing workshops and selling their artwork and everything. And they've raised about 2 lakhs so far, just doing all
That's
of their work. And
fabulous.
I'm so proud of them. And they all have, they have their own inspiration. What is it that brings them here and why they want to do it? So I think motivating our next generation to do things for a cause, not just for themselves, is also, one way in which volunteering goes forward, and people can make an impact and create it to the next level. Sonal, just one couple of last questions that have come in. I don't want to keep you too long. Somebody wants to know, is nutrition still a primary issue? I mean, I know safety and all of these other things are also coming in, but does nutrition come in the forefront at all right now, or has it taken a bit of a backseat? Not food, but nutrition.
I wouldn't, kind of. Okay, let me give you. It's a Pandora's box, Mahima, that you've opened. I'll give you two, three examples. Okay, completely from the ground, not getting into the law and the other big part. And anyway, I'm not much of a. I know the law, but I'm not a lawyer. So I'll give you examples from the ground. That the fact that we all of us have seen the pictures, if not face to face, of what happened with the migrants, the brothers and sisters last year. They're walking back from the towns to the streets to the rural spaces, and so on and so forth. All of that, right? It's not hidden from anyone. What we forget is, the public memory of everything is so um, finicky and superficial, that what seems like a migrant's crisis or migrant issue, it doesn't end there. The fact that they've lost their jobs or their livelihoods or their incomes, who will be impacted the most? The first thing is, now these guys don't have huge savings, right? The first thing that gets impacted is their food and nutrition. A lot of government schemes have come in. A lot of, one of the reasons why, when we are giving dry ration kits at Protsahan, we make absolutely bloody well sure that it's not just roti chawal, it's not just flour, wheat flour, or rice, or we make sure soya bean is added. We make sure some semblance of, like, 5-6 kgs of different pulses, rajma, beans, XYZ is added. Because protein is critical. It's a lot of the state-led programs that I see across the country, state-led as
Yeah.
in center, state, whatever, government-led programs, all of them focus on khichdi. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that's not important. For a hungry, dying person, you feed them a packet of parle ji, that is critical, right? But when the fact that you raise the question of food versus nutrition, it becomes important, because last year when we were on the ground, distributing cooked meals and all of that, the people, the beneficiaries, a word that I honestly hate to use, but people who we were serving, they were eating, and because food would come to us from an XYZ, either a corporate partner, or like a government kitchen, or a donor sponsoring rice and or XYZ. And they said, this is the sixth day of eating khichdi for the second time, for the 12th time. And when we would and as an NGO, as an implementation partner, we were not making food in our kitchens, right? So we would go back to our corporate partner or a donor to say, hey, today don't send chapati or XYZ. The simple, because we know that when you're feeding like lakhs of people and not thousands, making rotis and making chapatis is a tough job. Like, we understand the logistics of it also. So we said, when you're making the rice, just add a little soya bean badi, just add a little chana, just add, don't, we're not saying make it expensive, because there's also money and logistics, all of that involved. But we said, hey, can you, if maybe just instead of so much rice, make the rice this much, but add a little bit of soya bean vadi, which is protein, right? Because rice is just carbs, right? And it took us like 10 days of convincing those guys for that little change, and they didn't have to kind of bear any extra cost, right? It was just they're like, khichdi is fine, right? So I think sometimes understanding the needs and the choices and the dignity of the receiver on the ground um, is some, uh, uh, we unintentionally, I won't blame people on this, but I think sometimes people just unintentionally forget that, you don't want to wear the same shirt,
Yes.
the next day. How can you expect somebody to eat the 12th meal of the same damn thing just because they are, hungry and poor, and, by the definition of poor, whatever you will give them, they're meant to eat. And if they say, "Nay, we don't want to eat," you're like, "Oh, you're not eating what we're feeding you or giving you or donating to you." Right. And I think that that's savior's complex, that superiority of understanding that we are the donors and givers. I think massaging of donors' egos has never been our priority or philosophy, or in fact, that's something that makes my blood boil. A lot of people might just be offended. But I think some things need to be said and said out aloud, because somebody has to goddamn, well, say it, right? Because choice and dignity at the end is critical. When we are giving our adolescent, I'll give you another little example. We are giving all these dry rations and protein and all of that, and then we realized, all the adolescent girls that we've been working with, especially the ones we've rescued for, and we have a very close relationship with those bachas, with those kids. And we said, okay, government protection schemes, linkages with the government scheme, trauma counseling, XYZ, food. But what is it that this child would need? Right. And then just half an hour conversation, and the team came up, my grassroots team, they're more fabulous and just brilliant in every way that I can never be. And they said, let's just kind of make a happiness kit. And we got some pratham books. We got, so in every, we put sanitary napkins. We also realized in the last 3 4, in fact last year also this issue had come up, and especially in the last 3 4 months, where people don't have enough to eat, right? So even when you give sanitary napkins, to the girls, because the schools are closed, some of them do have stocks of sanitary napkins, but mostly the girls have lost, and they've gotten back to using cloth and, grass and straw and, things like that, right? Which is again a crazy medical emergency or issue that it can kind of lead to. Um, because all of these things are interconnected as child rights violations, or children in distress issues. It's not one bit. That's why I say it's not just about children losing parents. So this child, or these set of girls rather, they said, okay, sanitary napkins, but we don't have panties to put it on, right? So then we, kind of spoke to donors and stuff, and then, somebody just got us, like, fascinating. It's still, people are still giving us. So people just gave us those, little innerwear for the girls, small size, medium size, large size. So when the happiness kits were being made, we put in some cartoon animation books, we put in a lot of colors, crayons, sketch pens, we put in coloring books, age appropriate wise, we put in shampoo sachets, right? Because a girl wants to feel pretty and happy and, smelling nice. Why should, our, and we spoke to a lot of girls who said, okay, we would want this and we would want that, and we create something so tiny and simple as a happiness kit, because choice and dignity. I mean, any sort of charity or, whatever work that anybody ends up doing, agar usme, if there's not enough love and dignity attached to it, I think might as well not just do it.
This is kind of like the real distinction between sympathy and empathy too, right?
Mm,
It's like the difference between, doing charity in a way where it's my version of what you need, versus actually understanding what it is that you probably require, and taking that to the next level. Because, like, we talked about, the miscellaneous requirements, but when it came back to food, nutrition is an important element that is getting compromised. And it's getting compromised on all fronts, simply because right now we're only thinking of pet bharna hai, how do we fill the stomach. And
mm.
therefore, just, and that kind of extrapolates into all scenarios. Food is a primary thing.
And I will just, just before I forget, Mahima, to this very exact point that you mentioned, a lot of people feel that giving cooked meals. See, I can talk about Delhi right now, right? Temperatures are soaring, 47, 48 degrees today. Maybe it's a little lesser, but generally it's very high, right? And cooked meal, the logistics of cooked meals is a little more difficult than dry rations. One, two, when you give cooked meal, you make sure that the person who's standing in line is constantly standing in line for lunch and a dinner meal. Today, tomorrow, lunch and a dinner meal. Third day, lunch and a dinner meal, and you're only feeding them khichdi. But the minute you say, okay, we're going to make a dry ration kit of XYZ, dalia, chawal, gur, whatever the local material is, or with simple flour and rice as the main constituents, and not give it as a 2 kg flour, 2 kg rice. Give it at least a 10-15 kg rice, 10-15 kg of atta,
Correct.
something that lasts them a month, so that they don't have to sacrifice. How easy would it be for anybody to stand in a line to get their everyday meal? So for for
Yeah.
for the giver, it's like, I'm distributing food,
Yeah.
right? But give it, I mean, I'm not saying don't do it. If there's a choice, if there is no choice, then just do whatever is possible, right? Feed people irrespective. But if it's a choice, give dry rations first, because that person can, cook and has more options and choice to kind
Yeah.
of, feed their family, right?
That's
It's
true.
silly,
That's
it's something so silly and tiny, but it makes all the difference for the one receiving it, right?
absolutely, absolutely. It's been such an illuminating conversation, Sonal. We can go on and on, but I don't want to hold you back for too much longer. Are there any parting words? Any thoughts that you want to leave the audience with? Some things that they can work on.
um, I think, just donate to any children's charity that you believe in. I will not just make a case for Protsahan. Protsahan, of course, give money to Protsahan. We also need it. But if you're not, if you don't know about our work, and if you know somebody, some other charity who you really, really trust, you've known, just donate. Do fundraisers if you know those guys are credible and genuine, because every other child rights organization in the country is trying to reach out to children who don't have access to the core basics, right? If you have nothing, buy stuff and give it to a charity that you trust, or to individuals who are working with children. And I think all of this adds up. Never ever ever think that you're not doing enough, or you have to constantly donate every month. Do it once, but do it with a lot of love. Do little silly small things, but do it with a lot of love, and do it in a committed fashion. Don't do it because, today I feel very, I want to just get the guilt off my, heart and soul. Yeah, okay, maybe, okay, just do that also, I think, to begin with. That's the crisis we find ourselves in. But just do anything that spreads a little light and hope for children in the world. There's this
Sonal,
this in this last point, Mahima, sorry.
no, no, no.
There's this lot of, we need to understand that this entire second wave, or this impending third wave, it's a crisis that exists or extends beyond oxygen. We have to realize that child hunger is an issue. We have to realize that abuse of children is an issue, and not just focus on a certain media narrative, which is not a lie, but it's a half truth, and half truths are nothing but, not the truths.
Sonal, a thought occurred to me for people who are, wanting to donate from abroad but can't because of the FCRA limitations. Are they allowed to, donate in kind? You're talking about donate provisions and stuff. Are they allowed to have provisions delivered to you, or does that also
So I
not?
think, I'm not a CA or a lawyer here, but I think as long as it doesn't form the part of the organization's infrastructure, or some sort of a table, chair, computer,
Uh-huh.
laptop, don't do that, because I think that's clearly against the FCRA bit. But if you have to just feed people, I think, if you're doing it in kind, even if not via the NGO, via the individuals who are volunteers with an XYZ community, and all of that, I think, but just have that checked once for sure.
Okay, so that does seem like some way, because I know people are very eager, and they want to help, but they don't know how to do it. It's our own citizens who are sitting abroad and want to do something for the country. So, yeah, so that those are very good parting words. Thank you, Sonal, for spending your time with us and sharing your valuable knowledge and experience with everyone. I'm sure it's answered a whole bunch of questions. And for those of you who couldn't log in, for people who couldn't log in, if your friends and family couldn't, this conversation will be up on YouTube in the Kindness Foundation's channel. So you can please, you can come back and listen to it. You can refer to it. There is a lot of very valuable advice that Sonal has shared with us today. So thank you everyone for joining in, and thank you, Sonal, for sharing your valuable time with us. There's some very nice feedback and comments in the chat box. People, we're done for now, but if you want to stay back and just share your comments, you're welcome to do. But the conversation for now is over for now.
Thank you, Mahima.
Thank you.